Hey, I think I may be live. I can never really be sure because unfortunately, Google makes it very hard for me to know exactly when I start. Anyway, howdy guys, Jimmy Song here. Welcome to another episode of Bitcoin Tech Talk. This is the show every week where I go through my newsletter. My newsletter is available on jimmysong.substack.com, and you get a newsletter of all the tech happenings that happened in Bitcoin in the past week, along with some economics news and things like that. So, go in the show notes if you want to take a look at it. But yeah, let's dive right in. Here is this week's issue: Open Hardware for Bitcoin, Bitcoin Tech Talk issue 189. And here's some things, right? Like hardware security is really hard, and especially if you're used to sort of like software security where the code is all there is. With hardware, it is extremely difficult because there's so many vendors, so many suppliers, so many different people that you have to trust in order to create that device. This presents a big problem because a lot of people are much more comfortable with the security of something in hardware rather than in software. So the way in which the industry has evolved is that there are these things called secure elements, and basically they hold your private key in that secure element, and it never leaves that secure element enclave. And that's the standard way that it's been done. The thing about the secure element is, how do you know that it's really secure, that there isn't some sort of side channel attack or some way to compromise the key on that chip? Well, there are these certification bodies that look for certain ways to compromise it, and they essentially certify that it's secure. The only thing about doing this sort of modularization is that these certification bodies are essentially centralized, and as a result, they don't really have the security of the element in mind, because the entities that pay for these are the people that want to get certified. So if I'm a chip maker and I made a secure element, I submit it to the certification body. They might go back and forth a few times, but if the certification body just says, no, we're not going to certify this chip, well, they're out a lot of revenue, and basically the chip manufacturer is going to go somewhere else to get it certified. So it ends up being kind of a really nasty set of incentives, and this is what Trezor pointed out in this article, Introduction to Tropic Square: Why Transparency Matters. And this will be our long read today. But basically, what they're doing is open sourcing their hardware and making it so that anyone can take a look at it and sort of criticize it, because they went into this thing wanting to use a secure element, but then they were forced to sign an NDA saying they won't disclose anything that they find as a result of the hardware documentation that they got access to. And they found some vulnerabilities, but they can't say anything about them other than in sort of general, like they did in this blog post. So as a result, they're going about it a different way, and it's a really exciting project where they're going to create a secure element in an open way, which is kind of like open source software, but at a hardware level, and that's highly unusual. So really good on them for doing that. We'll talk more about it in a bit. Earlier this week, a very early Coinbase transaction output was spent, probably to an exchange. I wrote a story explaining all this. This is why Satoshi probably didn't move some coins from 2009, and this is based on the extra nonce analysis that Sergio Lerner's done. I don't necessarily think these are Satoshi's coins, like the blue strands, and this is whom Sergio calls Patoshi or whatever. All of these, as far as we know, are not spent, and that's but this one was spent, and it wasn't part of these blue strands. So I argue essentially in this article that it wasn't Patoshi or whoever has all of these other coins that spent the coins in question. So there really wasn't need for market panic. Unchained Capital has announced this very interesting product, Gearing Up Caravan. So Caravan was a multi-sig address coordinator. They've upgraded it and made it into an open source multi-sig wallet coordinator. So you can plug in different hardware wallets and basically make it so that you can sign pieces of multi-sig and so on. So it's a really cool idea, and it's open source, which is great. So you can use this right now. So you can go go download the Caravan wallet. Create XPubs, which are public keys from your hardware wallets. Import it into Caravan, create multi-sigs, and then be able to do multi-sig addresses. This will up your security significantly almost right away. So, you still have to, keep the hardware wallet secure and so on. But it's a fantastic product. I would encourage you guys to look into it if you want to go multi-sig. If you have everything on a single Trezor, for example, this might be a way to enhance your security. All right, Casa has a new product. These are seedless. This is a seedless security model. Now, their argument essentially is that seed phrase backups are very vulnerable because anyone can go look at it and get your private keys. Even in a multi-sig setup, that kind of sucks. So they decided to get rid of seeds entirely and make it so that it's encrypted on their end. Now, it introduces some weird, edge cases that I'm not sure I'm entirely comfortable with, among others, because of their 3 of 5, which is really kind of like 3 of 6. It is possible, for example, if you have one of your backups in a bank vault, one of the keys is with Casa and another with like an estate lawyer or something like that, that they're able to take your Bitcoins away without your permission, which would be really, really bad. But I mean, this is a trade-off that might make sense for you, especially if you don't want to bother with seeds and things like that. And the really slick part of their product that I think is very useful is the ability to rotate keys in and out. If you have like 3 of 5, for example, and one of your keys is compromised, now you can go and rotate it out for a new one, and that would be amazing. All right, Lightning. John Cantrell has announced Juggernaut, and this is a Lightning-based messenger application. So this is end-to-end encryption using the Lightning Network. So as long as you are running your own Lightning node, you can set up Juggernaut and basically have end-to-end encryption. The people sending you messages encrypted to your node. Your node ID is essentially a public key that they can encrypt whatever to, and you can read it because you have the private key. And you can do the same on the way back. So nobody in between gets to sniff at anything other than maybe the length of messages or something like that, and they only get encrypted payload. So really exciting, and the UI looks fantastic. It looks a lot like other messaging apps that you might have seen, and in addition, you have a wallet built in. So it might be something like, hey, oh yeah, I owe you $15 for dinner the other day or something like that, and you can just sort of send them a Lightning payment right away. So I mean that's the idea here, and it's a really, really slick product. I would love to see something like that get much more adoption in Bitcoin. And this in a way, it sort of like reverses what I thought would be the adoption of Lightning, which is that you would have a lot of people that wanted to pay things that got on the Lightning Network. What I'm thinking now is because of the need for end-to-end encryption that you can trust, Lightning Network, you never give up your private key and you encrypt everything. So nobody sees anything that you're sending or receiving except the people that you're intending. So as a result of that, that might be a reason for people to get on the Lightning Network, to set up their own node as a way to, create, an endpoint for this messaging stuff, and then the Lightning payment stuff might come later as a result. So really interesting way of viewing Lightning, and that might be the path to adoption for Lightning, and I'm very optimistic about that. All right, this is a really interesting article. Arthur Hayes has written a really kind of like insider view of what it's like being an investment banker, basically. And essentially, what he's talking about is that, for investment banking, just being average is really, really nice because you get paid a lot of money. You get and you don't have to do very much. You don't have to risk much, which is why it's also hard to be extraordinary. And he calls Paul Tudor Jones as an extraordinary trader, right? Like somebody that's actually elite, that has original thinking. Because in a place where average gets you really, really good returns, and where if you're below average, you go away and you don't get to participate in anything. What ends up happening is you get a lot of people that are risk averse, and you don't have anybody that's actually thinking next level, except the exceptional few, and Paul Tudor Jones is apparently one of them. And his argument is that the fact that he's talking about Bitcoin means that he already owns it, and the fact that he already owns it also means that like he's trying to get other people to buy it because he's such a good trader. So as a result, what it means is that there are going to be people that are going to come into the Bitcoin space because Paul Tudor Jones has sort of like broken down that barrier. It's an excellent way, like insight into how investment bankers think. It's a little irreverent, and there are lots of curse words and stuff, but absolutely fantastic article and gives you a lot of insight into what's going on. All right, so I talked a little bit about this on Tone's show, I think last week, but this is the Btc Deposit Pause on May 18th. So they basically made it so that the Btc system paused. And Btc is basically you deposit Bitcoin to some centralized entity on Ethereum, and they credit you something equivalent to BTC, Btc, on the Ethereum network, so you could do direct atomic trades and stuff, so on Ethereum. It turns out that they didn't write their smart contract very well, and as a result, basically you couldn't there were all sorts of vulnerabilities that were exposed, so they had to stop the whole thing, and they had a centralized committee that decided to stop the whole thing, which is hilarious, but that's how it that's what these things are like. This is the snippet of code that apparently had problems, and this they gave a very frank incident report, which is great. I encourage transparency like that, but the entire DApp ecosystem probably has lots of bugs like this, where they don't really know what they're doing, and the language doesn't lend itself to being provable of much. So it's like many DeFi products. It's lacking in decentralization, and it's dangerous to your finances. I talked about this on Tone's show, but Steam has seized like $5 million worth of Steam from its users, and this is a hilarious quote here. Shouldn't every user just be moving to Hive at this point? Shouldn't every Ethereum user just be moving to Tron at this point? He's trolling Vitalik because Vitalik trolled him. So the code apparently has like a list of usernames that it's just going to zero out their balances. And remember, that's what a hard fork is. You can reset the ledger to whatever the heck you want, and that's I still don't understand why so many altcoiners don't understand why hard forks are so dangerous. It's a centralization honeypot. Anytime anyone gets pressured by a government, this is how they're going to get. If I want some Ethereum as a government, I arrest Vitalik's family and tell him, do a hard fork where I get 1 billion Ethereum. And I mean, they could do it. It seems so stupid. All right, BlockFi has had a massive security breach. So I talked about this on Tone's show, but this is the incident on May 14th, and basically here are the things that got leaked: social security number, driver's license number, account number, credit debit card number, like, it's not as bad as your actual Bitcoins, but this is pretty freaking bad, right? Like, most of these are like, you get into a lot of FTC violations and things like that. So I would not be keeping money on there, just because that's a really, really big security breach. Zcash has really small anonymity sets, and this academic paper sort of talks about it, and it's altcoin traceability. And essentially what it comes down to is that Zcash has like very few shielded transactions, which means that at the end of the day, you're not hiding with too many others, and if anyone sees you going into the shielded transaction, then you're kind of toast, because there aren't that many shielded transactions. And this is at a deeper level due to the difficulty of creating shielded transactions, and that's what kind of tends to happen. I did a bunch of shows, and you can of course support this newsletter by reading my books. My books are Programming Bitcoin, Learn Bitcoin from Scratch. And the other one is the Little Bitcoin book, which you can get in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. All right, so before I do the long read, let's go through my Twitter feed, and I will explain to you some of my tweets from this week and look at what was popular. All right, so this was... all right, I think it was right here. All right, so here we go. Answers for Bitcoin news. No, blockchains are not useful for anything other than Bitcoin. Altcoins are not a good investment. Nobody is giving away 5,000 BTC. Quantum computing doesn't threaten it. Proof of stake is not better. Electricity isn't being wasted. So that's, these are all sort of newbie questions a lot of people ask. I just wanted to get them out of the way. It was one of my more popular tweets this week. Imagine if governments had to balance budgets. Imagine if companies had to actually make a profit. Imagine if all jobs had to add value. Imagine if we weren't subject to monetary tyranny. Imagine a world on the Bitcoin standard. And this is what I'm certainly hoping for after this crisis, is that governments start being a lot more responsible, because they kind of got us into this mess. They're able to enforce all of these things because they can essentially print money. The reason why we could be locked down was because, hey, we could compensate you by printing more money. It's not really how it should work. Inflation is theft, and that means the Fed has been stealing from you all this time. And by you, I mean everyone around the world. And this is the dollarization that is happening to pretty much every other currency. I'm sure we're going to see a lot more inflation in third world countries than in the US, for example. I did do this debate with Chow, I think, and it was about whether the market rescue or the bailouts make sense. I took the no side. Altcoiners, regarding your bad choices: bad, blaming others for them; worse, rationalize them as good choices; worse, double down and throw good money after bad. Redemption in Bitcoin is permissionless. So, this is the truth. And I as you'll see in another tweet later, I think altcoins have some tough times coming soon. What if they're prolonging the lockdown so we don't see just how much economic devastation there is? And I think there is some element of that, sort of like, let's prolong this as long as possible so people don't see just how bad it got. Like I went downtown, the other day, and I see like, rows of stores where it's empty, or like it's closed down because, commercial real estate's going to just completely bomb. I did write this article, which I talked about earlier, and somebody wanted to translate it. I did White Paper Wednesday and Tone Show. Imagine having the patience to sit through 11 years of price run-ups and crashes. That's royal pride preference behavior. So we found out today that there's somebody that's been waiting 11 years with something like $65 million in Bitcoin. Hasn't even moved it. That is some serious low time preference behavior. Do you want freedom or permission? Do you want progress or stagnation? Do you want fairness or cronyism? The fiat system and the dollar hegemony in particular promotes the latter. Bitcoin promotes the former. Freedom, progress, and fairness. For an exchange, listing an altcoin is trading short-term trading value and possibly listing fee for long-term maintenance costs. It's a long-term loser, especially since coins live a lot longer than they have liquidity. So, altcoin trading for exchanges, I talked about this on Tone's show, tends to have almost infinite liability, like going forward. Whereas, you might make money short term. I don't think most of those exchanges will end up surviving some of these lawsuits that are headed their way. Fiat money infects people with high time preference, rent-seeking behavior, preoccupation with money, and economic illiteracy. Bitcoin will set you free. And this is something that I've noticed, is that if people are infected with fiat money, they want to spend. They want to find a job where they don't have to do very much. They're preoccupied with keeping their money, and they're completely economically illiterate. And that's unfortunately describes way too many people today. Those $92 million pizzas are going to look cheap compared to what it'll look like in another 10 years. For Pizza Day, I showed the transaction that actually transferred 10,000 Bitcoins. And you can see that right here. It was May 22nd, 2010, and it transferred exactly 10,000 Bitcoins. What's interesting about this transaction actually is that I think it's at the top. You can see how much in fees, 0.99 Bitcoin. So, it was almost 1 Bitcoin back then, which was what, 40 cents. Fees actually have gone down a little bit. You're seeing 1 to 2 Satoshi transactions going through. So, all right. Let's see. Life is unfair. If you're expecting the government to help with that, you're going to have a bad time. And this has been true forever. Life is unfair. The people that should be helping are the people in your community, your friends and family, not the government. Then it becomes rules-based and political cronyism. We need a Bitcoin stake day. I'm hoping that happens sometime, but it's not right now. More Bitcoin newbie advice. GBTC is worse than coins on an exchange, is worse than software wallet, is worse than a hardware wallet, is worse than a multi-sig or non-custodian third party. Don't get into mining unless you have an edge. Learn about sound money, and don't be cheap with security. It's worth spending some money on security. Imagining how hopeless everything would seem right now without Bitcoin. This was my most popular tweet this week, and this is because I guess a lot of people feel optimistic because of Bitcoin, and I think that's absolutely true. Say the amount of Bitcoin you want to acquire is eventually 100%. What percentage are you at now? Most people seem to be on the beginning of their journey. About 40% are between 0 and 25% of where they actually want to be, and there's like 16% that are OGs that already have enough. Bitcoin analogies you can expect from noobs. Tulips, MySpace, Model T, Beanie Babies, Pets.com. If anyone mentions these, ask them what decentralized digital scarcity means. Bitcoin is entering the eternal September. So some people didn't know what eternal September was. Basically, this was Usenet back in the 90s. Every September, there'd be a new group of freshmen that would be entering the Usenets and asking like sort of newbie questions. It's a lot, but one fall, it became sort of an eternal September. There were permanently new noobs coming in every day because AOL got popular. So that's what I was referencing. It's going to be an eternal September in Bitcoin. You're going to see noobs all the time from this point on, I think. When people feel burned by the economic system, people that feel burned by the economic system are looking into Bitcoin. When the lockdown is over, a lot more people are going to feel burned. And this is my contention, that when people go outside, go to the stores and see that, they're closed, they're fair, the hair cutting place that they go to is no longer there. The mom and pop, retail store is no longer there. They're going to start feeling some pressure, and then they see half their office has been laid off. That's when they're going to start feeling screwed by the financial system. The economic downturn is an interesting test for altcoins. During good times, speculation, gambling is rampant. During downturns, people fly to liquidity, which is Bitcoin or USD, meaning much lower liquidity for alts or a sharp drop in their price. What do you think will happen? So, people tend to go to liquidity when there's downturn, and as they feel economic pressure, there's this desire to go to liquidity and do something with it. We'll see what happens, but alts do seem like they will lack liquidity and probably drop in price as a result. All right, so those are my tweets from this week. Let's see if there are any questions before I do my long read, because it looks like there's been a lot of comments. All right. All right. Let's see. This is something you can buy pre-made. I guess somebody they're really having a conversation over there. So, all right. So I don't really see any questions. Let's go to a long read. Introducing Tropic Square: Why Transparency Matters from Satoshi Labs. In 2012, we brought you Trezor, the first hardware wallet, creating a brand new industry. Since the beginning, we've built our product on a very strong philosophy. Let's be as open as possible. Let our customers have as much information as possible so they can always make informed decisions for themselves. We still believe that this was the right choice. Recently, there were a lot of discussions about the terms open source and secure element, but these two terms were quite often misrepresented. Let's have a look at what they really mean. The beauty of open source. For some people, the term open source means that software is free of charge. However, this term stands for much more than that. Open source means that anyone is welcome to study, modify, distribute, and build on top of the software. This is especially critical in the context of Bitcoin, where we need to fully understand how everything works in order to build a truly decentralized system providing self-sovereignty and independence for its users. There is no other way to break free from government institutions, centralized banking, and so on. So, in other words, open source is really about being open, and that's something that a lot of people miss about the open source movement. Seeing Trezor as an integral part of the Bitcoin ecosystem, we wanted to stay truthful to this vision of breaking free. That's why we are continuously advocating for the freedom of open source. Freedom open source provides. We believe when it comes to your security, you shouldn't be required to trust anyone, and you should be able to verify everything. In our efforts to build a truly open hardware wallet, we tried to expand the trustless part as much as possible. We partly succeeded in removing us from the trust equation by creating open source software and open source hardware, but this effort is not currently possible to the fullest extent. At some point, the poetic ideals must meet the real world, the world which lacks transparency and in which various pieces of information are kept proprietary by their gatekeepers makes it hard to invite independent experts for review. In this world, there is a special category of chips called secure element claiming to be secure because they have received lots of certifications. They offer physical guarantees, but they do this at the price of the aforementioned lower transparency and increased required trust. We decided to avoid using these chips so our solution would not depend on blind trust in a third party, but we paid the price too. For people that really need the physical security of the chip, we came up with the mitigation. A passphrase that is entered at the start of the device, splitting the secret into two, one stored on the device and another one stored in the head of the user. However, this makes the user experience a little bit worse because users now have to remember and enter the passphrase. Ideally, we would want the physical guarantees of secure element without the need to trust the chip vendor. But you might ask, what's wrong with trusting the chip vendor? They have various certifications after all, right? Well, here's why. Why certifications are wrong. Current certifications, such as Commons criteria, discriminate against free and open source development models. The reason is they were developed before the rise of open source, so they don't credit mass peer review and the detailed code review. What's even worse is that certifications test only against a known set of predefined scenarios. Behavior outside of these scenarios is not tested at all and declared out of the scope of certification. However, that's exactly the area where hackers operate, and this is absolutely true. As soon as you have a certification in one thing, as long as there's a backdoor that's easier, that's exactly where hackers go. Government policies assume projects without certification are not secure, requiring a vendor to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to get certified. These policies exclude independent companies and open source initiatives from being used in professional areas. And this is also true, is that often there are regulatory moats. This, in effect, causes companies to have very little motivation to undergo independent audits from security specialists. All they need is to get certified. Having all these certifications is ultimately just an easy business and marketing strategy. And I've heard of this happening in other industries too. Something like seatbelts. Once you get certified by, I guess it's the Highway and Transport Security Administration. Once they say that a seatbelt is good enough, they don't do any other testing, right? Like usually they have crash tests that they require or whatever, but that's the limit, right? Like they don't try to improve it further, and that's this happens when there's government regulation saying these are the only things that you need to do, and they might have been written years ago. There's technology that could make it better, but none of them are motivated to go do any of that, despite the hackers having access to better and better tools. Most, if not all, secure element vendors require you to sign the NDA and a non-disclosure agreement in case you want to access documentation of their chips. Some of them even require you to do so even if you only want to buy their chips. So there is no way you can obtain one without signing the NDA. And non-disclosure agreements are, of course, like you get sued if you leak anything from the non-disclosure agreement. Our dive into the secure element NDA chips and how we broke them. Even though we did not believe in secure element and security by NDAs, over the 7 years, we have investigated secure element as much as everybody else. We even came up with a treasure model containing a secure element. However, we only confirmed our assumptions and saved us and our customers lots of future trouble. In one of the many options we reviewed, we saw a potential candidate for a secure element to be used in our product, and we went deeper into our research. As this was a common criteria certified chip, we did not expect what we found. Over a few weeks, we uncovered several different critical flaws requiring no special hardware, leading to the extraction of the secrets from the chip. We quickly realized these were the attacks nobody tested against, not the vendor nor any certification party that provided the certifications. In other words, it's vulnerable to something that they're not particularly testing. We started to plan a responsible disclosure and reported issues to the vendor. During the call with the management that followed, we learned that the vendor will now communicate the vulnerabilities to their customers, and we won't be able to tell the world about these critical mistakes either because of the NDA we were forced to sign to get the full documentation of the chip. In other words, it's like basically all of these devices are vulnerable. They want to do responsible disclosure, create a recall and stuff like that, and they're like, you can't do it. And that's really, really horrible, right? Like any hacker that signs this NDA, gets the documentation, or say hack somebody that has the documentation, can probably pull off an attack that uses these chips in some way, shape, or form. We did not even try very hard to break the chip, and if we managed to do it, we are sure somebody else could do it too. However, they are not able to divulge this either because of the infectious nature of the NDAs. When we asked the company if they were interested in a full audit of the chip performed by us, we were laughed at because doing so will not give the vendor any official certification the government policies and organizations are after. So in other words, these certification bodies don't want to disclose, don't want any full audit or anything like that. They don't want to make the product better because they already have the approval of government through regulations and so on. To summarize, not only are the current certifications not very useful because of their very limited guarantees, but also NDAs are very bad because of their infectious nature of withholding information. This is all happening because the incentives of the hardware vendors are not aligned with the incentives of their users, and the hardware vendors don't hesitate to use every possible way to protect their needs before the needs of their users. Introducing Tropic Square. So they summed up basically what's going on and the big problem with certification. And I think they've made their case abundantly clear and fantastically. And I totally, completely agree with them. Introducing Tropic Square. In order to ultimately fulfill our original hardware wallet vision, we need an all-open, fully auditable chip. We come from the Bitcoin background where the emphasis on don't trust, verify is very strong, but thinking further, we realize this is a pressing issue not only for hardware wallet manufacturers, but it is important for any hardware manufacturer or their customers that requires transparent security. The security that can and should be audited by a wide community of security experts. Any industry where gatekeepers are not welcome. Internet of Things, Secure Boot, you name it. We all deserve to live in a better world, and it's time to fix it here and now. We are very well aware we are not able to do it by ourselves. That's why we have invited the best people in the field we know. Evzen Engelberth, a CEO, an expert with more than 18 years of experience in the field of electronic manufacturing services, EMS, and a former sales director for Jablotron Group, Jan Pleskak, an experienced ASIC FPGA design architect and application engineer with a demonstrated history of working for brands like Intel and S3 Group. Together, we are building a new company, Tropic Square, the creators of the next truly open integrated circuit, Tropic, TROPIC. This new entity's purpose is to deliver a chip as open source as possible. The goal is to provide access to design specifications, verification, and testing without obscurity. There is also work to be done on physical implementation to make the chip secure, yet transparent and verifiable by anyone. If you are interested in knowing more or want to join forces with our team, go to our webpage, tropicsquare.com, and let us know. So I think that's a fantastic initiative, and I really do hope that they succeed in this goal, and that more vendors go towards this and do what they want to achieve. All right. Hey Jimmy, you ever seen the Princess of the Yen? Best documentary on central banking I've ever seen. Also, what's the best Python library for Bitcoin? Well, I have seen Princess of the Yen, and I literally watched it this past weekend. So yeah, a very interesting documentary. I would say that the big aha for me in that documentary was that the IMF was pressuring every central bank into becoming independent. The thing I didn't agree was sort of like the economics of it, saying that, if the central bank just printed more money, it would be okay. No, it wouldn't. So fiscal restraint was actually like called for in some way. But other than that, I thought it was a fantastic documentary. Best Python library for Bitcoin. I mean, I have one, and I wrote it because I didn't like the libraries that existed. But I mean, there are several good ones. I mean, they're good. They just didn't fit my style of coding and didn't do everything that I wanted. That's all. So PyCoin is one. Richard Kiss. I think there's Pi Bitcoin Tools or something like that. That's maintained. That used to be Peter Todd's. That's maintained by Brian Bishop and so on. So I would say those. Let's see, another question. Do you have any hardware wallets that you recommend? I think a multi-sig setup with Caravan using like Trezor, Ledger, and Cold Card would probably be a good idea. There are other wallets that are coming out, including this one, which I have to really evaluate. This one is BC Vault, and they have a bunch of stuff that. Apparently, if it can do multi-sig, that would be fantastic. I think KeepKey is very similar to Trezor because it's very that's basically they took the open source Trezor code and created their own. What does multi-sig mean? Means you need more than one signature. So yeah, that's it. So you need not just one signature from your Trezor Model T, but another one. Programming book as a .NET developer. If you understand Python, then absolutely you can learn from the programming Bitcoin book. But I mean, if all you know is .NET, I don't think it would take you very long to pick up Python. It's an easier language, I think. All right. So anyway, that's it for now. It's kind of been a crazy week. We've had so many things happen, and it's still kind of surreal, like being in quarantine and everything. So, stay safe. Fiat delenda est.